Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World Pulse podcast. I'm your host, Sheena Katz, and I'm really glad that you're here today. World Pulse is a social impact network supporting grassroots women leaders advancing gender equity worldwide. And this podcast is here to explore how change actually happens in the world, not only through policies or institutions, but through connection, through listening, and through the bridges that we build between people, communities, and possibility. At World Pulse, we often talk about creating a digital bridge to change, a bridge that connects women across borders, cultures, and lived experiences, a bridge that turns stories into shared understanding and understanding into collective action. Because meaningful change does not happen in isolation. It happens when women are able to find one another across geography, sector, and circumstance and move forward together. In this podcast series, we're especially interested in how women navigate complexity, how they build trust, how they make decisions in moments of uncertainty, and how connection, particularly in a digital world, becomes a catalyst for real, lasting change. Each episode is an invitation, not just to listen, but to cross a bridge, to reflect, to engage, and to see yourself as part of a global community working towards a more just and equitable future. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies that bridge. Elaine Montilla is a tech executive, CIO and CTO, TEDx speaker, and founder of 5X Minority, a leadership and advocacy platform dedicated to helping women and underrepresented communities thrive in the workplace while being their whole selves. With more than 2 decades of executive leadership experience, Elaine works at the intersection of innovation, inclusive leadership, and human-centered transformation. Through 5X Minority, she challenges the status quo in tech, treating diversity not as a checkbox, but as a driver of innovation, psychological safety, and high-performing teams. But beyond titles, Elaine is a systems thinker and a culture builder. She doesn't just ask how technology can scale. She asks who it serves, who it excludes, and how we can redesign systems so more people belong. Elaine, welcome to the World Pulse podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Sheena. I think I'm going to take you with me everywhere so that you can read the same intro everywhere I go because it was amazing.
Absolutely. Just take me on your luggage as you go on your trips.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, so let's jump right to it.
Yes, let's do it.
So you've led large-scale digital transformations as both a CIO and CTO across complex organizations. When you reflect on your leadership journey, what defining moments most shape the way that you think about power, responsibility, and impact?
That's a really good way to get started because I can tell you that one of the things that I learned growing up is that power was about control. And that's one of the things that I had to unlearn as I was able to move up the ladder is that power is not about control. I can tell you that early in my CIO role, I managed a lot of people, lots of money. And in my mind, I thought that it was all about delivering results, which I did. But it was not about that only. One of the things that I understood is that the real responsibility for leadership is actually shaping culture. And what I mean by that is, culture determines who speaks, who has a voice at the table, who gets promoted. How do you create safe spaces for people to be themselves? Who believes that they belong? And those are the things that I know that I went through as a technician getting started working in technology. And those are the things that I really think about and I'm intentional about now that I'm leading larger teams. I would say that a second decision for me was leaving the C-suite, which sounds weird. But, I think there came a point in my career after 20 something years of working in technology where I knew that I needed to redefine what impact actually meant to me because we get a lot of answers from other people and we have definitions that we have adopted from society. And so for me, the size of my team or my title is not what defined my impact. It was actually my influence and about people feeling safe around me. and people feeling empowered when I enter the room. And so I decided that I wanted to make a shift and switch into building trust and not creating fear for other people. And so I think that was a really big change for me.
That makes sense. It sounds like your definition of impact has also evolved as you've gone through your journey.
Yes, 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 definitely. And I think that especially as women, especially women who come from a minority group, I think that we are taught that being successful means having a title and having the money. And for me, I had to change my own definition of success. Peace and my mental health became more important than anything else. And I think that's a decision that I'm hoping helps other women and the younger generation to understand that you have to put yourself first above anything else.
Absolutely. And on that note, you're known for blending operational rigor with human centered leadership. So, in fast moving tech environments, how do you ensure that performance and accountability don't come at the expense of people?
Hmm. That's a good question because I think that a lot of leaders sometimes feel like performance and humanity are opposites. I remember growing up watching leaders and the way that they were displayed, I would say, in television and movies. And I had this idea of, this strong person who never made a mistake. And I think today, you just have to be yourself, but also be clear about your expectations from day one. Be clear about metrics. What are you measuring and why are you doing that? Be clear about holding people accountable, which I do everywhere I go. But also at the same time, understanding what are the conditions that I'm creating for people around me to succeed. It took me a lot of years to understand what that meant. But I feel that those are things that sometimes don't come unless you have the experience, the lived experience to see what's happening around you.
Absolutely. I watch the same movies and TV shows, and I know the kind of leader that you're talking about. It was not modeled to be someone who thinks about safety or anything that you're talking about.
Yes, one of the things that I do now is like if just a quick example, if someone misses a deadline, if you watch a movie, you hear a man yelling and screaming because something didn't get done. Nothing against men. I'm just making an example. But I think as women and being nurturers by nature, my first question is, what happened? Did you need support? Did I not set expectations? Like I want to first understand what happened and then we can make a correction and move from there. But I think sometimes we lose seeing human beings as human beings. And that's one of the things that I refuse to give up on and want to bring back anywhere I go.
And you've often stepped into organizations during periods of transformation too. So, how do you transform reactive systems into intentional, sustainable ones, especially when trust may already be fragile?
Yeah, I've done this a few times already, and I can tell you that one of the first things that I do is to listen. I think sometimes a mistake that leaders make is to try to recreate what worked before. And that could be really dangerous. I always want to understand what happened, why it happened, and the decisions that were made, why did we make those decisions? Maybe there is a good reason for that. And so I don't want to come into a new place and just have my name on some restructuring plan that I put together without really understanding where are we going. And before you know where you're going, you need to know why are you where you are right now. And so for me, I focus especially on clarifying decision rights, like who's making decisions, who has the authority to make decisions, and at what level. Then, like I mentioned earlier, well, what are the metrics that we're following and what are we measuring? Don't measure things just to measure. What are we doing with this information? Why is it relevant? And then the last one is building trust. I mean, when you come into a new place, especially when you're a female, sometimes people underestimate you. And I've had that happen to me. And so I spend the time to be transparent and to build trust with the teams and to be vulnerable and to let them know that I'm not perfect and that we are working with a common goal together. It's always together. And that has worked out really well. Yeah.
And speaking of your experience, you've spoken openly about being a Latina immigrant and often being the only woman or person of color in the room. What did those experiences teach you about visibility and voice?
Hmm. That's a good one. I can tell you that maybe something that we don't speak about enough is the fact that visibility and representing different groups sometimes carries a burden with it, because I know that when I enter a room, it's not just me. There are so many people that are coming behind me. And so whenever I'm working with a team, especially at a large organization with millions of dollars of budget, I always ask myself, not only how would I look, but how would this reflect in not only me, but my culture, my people, Latinas, members of the LGBTQ plus community. And so it's sometimes a pressure that you feel, um, and also a gift. I see it as a gift because I know that there were so many other courageous women who were before me, who created the environment for me to exist and for me to be there. And so I always try to keep that in mind. The second thing that is always relevant for me is understanding that silence is also a decision. And this is one of the things that I learned through public speaking. The fear will always be there. There is nothing you can do about it. But you learn through practice that when you use your voice and you speak up and you look around and you realize that nothing really happened, then with that practice, you feel more courageous to do it again and then to do it again. And it's hard. It's hard when you're the only one, but I know that you can find support and you can rely on people around you to help you. And I've been very lucky to be surrounded by amazing individuals who are helping me build the career that I have today.
I love that you solidified that the fear will always be there because a lot of people want to be the idea of fearlessness is really popular, and I just don't think it's possible to just get rid of it. It's just going to be there. So I love that you can mention that it can be there and you can keep going.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like people are waiting. Like we're just waiting. And sometimes we're waiting for the right time, or we're waiting for the right occasion, or we're waiting for the fear to not be there. And you'll be waiting forever. You'll be waiting forever. I think sometimes you have to just know that you're not alone. So even if you do take a big step, you don't know it when it happens, but there are always going to be people supporting you and behind you.
Absolutely. And speaking of waiting, you famously said that you're not waiting for a seat at the table, you're redesigning the room. What does redesigning the room actually look like inside corporate systems?
Hmm. I can tell you that's not an easy one. That's not an easy one, because I say that because sometimes you don't always control who gets invited, right? And so in my mind, I don't only focus on who gets invited, because sometimes I don't control that. But who's going to be allowed to use their voice? Once I know who's invited, who is going to be using their voice? Who's going to be at the table? I'm very intentional about running meetings where I make sure everyone speaks up. And I secretly take notes to see who said what. And then I go back to whoever didn't say anything and say, okay, Sheena, do you have anything you want to add? Is there anything we didn't mention? Because I want them to feel comfortable knowing that I'm coming to you and I'm gonna give you the floor and I'm gonna give you the space. And as women, I think we also need to support each other when we see the opposite happening. I've been in meetings where I would say, oh, that's interesting. I know Sheena mentioned that earlier. If somebody's trying to steal your idea, we need to be also courageous enough to do something like that. Um, Something that I witnessed a lot was this definition of executive presence, where the picture that was expected was a white man wearing a suit, who speaks very loud. And I think that we have to help other people recognize that authority can have an accent like the one that I have, It can look like empathy, which I demonstrate openly in my team meetings, and it can move sometimes at a different pace than traditional models of dominance. And it's taking some time, but I feel like we're making a lot of progress. We also have to be mindful about who's included in the succession plan is another example. Are we creating opportunities for mentorship and sponsorship? Because I think sometimes, and I did a TEDx talk on mentorship, sometimes we focus a lot on mentorship, but we forget that a lot of the real opportunities come from sponsorship and um, shining a light on people when they're not in the room. And so it's a lot of work. I'm not gonna say that it's easy, but it's doable, and it requires intentionality. And if you put your mind together and you're up for it, then you will make it happen.
And digging in a little bit deeper there, what does it mean to lead authentically in these environments that weren't necessarily designed with you in mind?
Hmm. I think people recently have been talking a lot about authenticity and being yourself. Um, and I feel like sometimes we're overthinking the thing that we need to do. I think sometimes we get to a point where we are performing leadership instead of embodying leadership. And so for me, it was very clear because as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I spent so many years hiding. I spent so many years not being myself. And I spent so many years going to meetings and worrying about what other people will think about me the moment they found out that I had a partner, because I couldn't say any other word other than partner. And so pretending is exhausting. It's really exhausting. I don't think you can sustain a career pretending. And so after doing that for years, I knew that there's no point. There is no point, because the people who love you and the people who would follow you, they will do it regardless. And so I think it takes a lot of courage, of course, because as humans, we all want to belong, we want to be a part of the group. But you don't want to do it with a version of yourself that's not you, because then you're also lying to yourself. Um, and so I was exhausted, and I decided that there is no point on doing any of that. And I can tell you that the minute that I made that change, my whole life changed, because I was able to even give more to that job, because I didn't have to pretend or think or remember what I said the day before. And so I think the company benefits a lot from having employees who can be, their whole selves in the workplace. I remember being two versions of Elaine. There was like a version of Elaine that would enter the workplace, and then another version when I came out of work. And that was too much. It was too much work. I'm only one, and you're going to see the same version everywhere I go.
And do you remember around when you decided to make that change to just be one version?
Yes. Oh my God. During this time, I was working at the university, and I was recently promoted to director of the client services team. And I remember meeting with my boss, who was an amazing person, and feeling, your body tells you it feels exhausting to have to pretend. And I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. So I decided to have a meeting with him in his office and say, I have something to tell you. And I remember he looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, okay, so what? It's interesting because sometimes we make problems bigger in our heads than they are, but it is because that's what we see on TV. That's what is reflected from society. We just have to keep in mind that not everyone feels that way. And the loudest voices are not always the ones that are right. And so it took me some time to realize that. But yeah, I think I was in my late 20s when that happened.
That's usually around the time when you decide to kind of switch. And, the good thing is that so much has changed in the last couple of years, which is good. And, for women and leaders from underrepresented communities listening today, what does claiming that space require, especially in tech?
Mm. Well, tech has come a long way. I would say there is still work to do. And that's one of the reasons I keep doing my work with 5X Minority. Um, you know, in my opinion, I would say there are three things that it requires. I would say the first one is clarity. Know your value. Know your value. And I'm a very spiritual person, and I feel like a lot of that came from that side of meditating every day and practicing mindfulness. I think that really helped me understand my value and know that I already have everything I need because I was born with it. There is no need for me to go outside and try to find that from somewhere else. The second thing that helped me was community. I think that especially moving to the US from another country, you don't know a lot of people and you learn to do things on your own. You learn that you have to figure out. I mean, I don't know. Okay, college. I didn't even speak English when I came here. How am I going to figure this out? And you learn to figure things out on your own. But then you have to unlearn that because you need other people to move forward. You don't rise alone. And so building a community and connecting with people like-minded and listening to people who are not like-minded too, because you don't want to put yourself in a bubble. And so I join a lot of groups like Latinas in Tech and Tecnolochicas and Out in Tech. And so I'm never alone. And I know that I can rely on other people, including my friends and family. And then the last one would be courage. I think that knowing that your voice is needed and it matters, even when you're scared. I can tell you that the first time that I used my voice in a meeting, someone ignored what I said 100%. And then a third person said, "Oh, no, Elaine, what you just said, can you just repeat that again?" And I was like, oh my God, they're coming back to me. Like what I just said was heard by someone who was a leader during that time and in a much higher position than me. And I was like, oh yeah, people are listening. People are listening. And it was scary, but it was fine. And so you need examples like that, and you need support from your community. And you need clarity. You need to know your value, because that's what's going to give you the strength to keep moving forward.
And digging in a little bit deeper on the tech side of things too. So, World Pulse, we talk a lot about being a digital bridge to change. That means using tech to connect voices and expand access. In your experience, when does tech become a barrier and when does it become a bridge?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that now more with the rise of AI. I would say that tech becomes a barrier. And I mean, I think this is very clear when access is not equal. When access is not equal, when is design and excluding lived experiences, when we are not part of that design from the beginning, and also when power is centralized, which we see happening a lot today. So we have to be paying a lot of attention to that. I've seen technology become a bridge when it amplifies marginalized voices. The fact that you and I can start a website tomorrow and pick a social platform and create videos and share anything we want is amazing. And also the fact that we can have free access to a ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude is also amazing. And so we need to take advantage of that. It's also a bridge when it increases access to education, which is also happening now with a lot of these LLMs. And when it connects communities, regardless of how far they are. And so I feel that we do have all of it. We just need to be mindful of the pieces that we are amplifying and the pieces that we need to be really careful about.
And speaking of AI, I know that you've highlighted that the AI gender gap is not a skills gap, but rather it's a support gap. So, what does that reveal about leadership responsibility in the AI era?
Yeah, and it's funny because I did a post about this on LinkedIn the other day, and yeah, I was really surprised that actually a woman challenged me, which is great. I love that. I wish I saw proof. I wish I wish that I saw some research that showed that is equal, that is 50-50, or that women are ahead. I mean, I'm dying to see that. I think that would be great. And whenever I use my voice to share a lot of this content, it's for awareness more than anything else, because I feel that there was so much that I did not know um, working in technology until someone shared with me. And so I want to share as much as I can because I think knowledge is power. Um, I think men, and some of it is the way that we were raised. I think men are more likely to experiment without fear or judgment. I think the way we were raised, sometimes you want to make sure you're doing the right thing and you want to make sure it's perfect. And sometimes we want to wait for permission. And sometimes we're waiting for training or validation. And so I see that happen. And I think a lot of it is part of our culture and the way that our parents raised us, especially from the Latinx community. And so in leadership, what that means is creating these spaces for experimentation where anyone and everyone is included and invited and supported 100% of the time. It also means providing structured learning. I have meetings now with my team, and we're creating goals for the year. And I want to know, how can I support you? What are you learning? What training sessions, which seminars, what conferences do we need to go to? But you have to be intentional, and it takes a lot of work. I think that's why sometimes it doesn't happen, because it takes a lot of time from management. I think the last thing I would say is we also need to normalize not knowing. This is a new technology. It's okay not to understand it 100%. And at the same time, take some time to play with it. Take some time to, go home and download it and watch a few videos. It's all there. I would say right now there is no barrier to learning because the information is there. But like you mentioned, in the corporate world, sometimes it's hard because of the structures that have been created. And sometimes a lot of women don't get picked for projects. So we need to change that, and we need to do better. And there's been a lot of progress. I think the fact that I was a CIO and a CTO, it's huge progress in the IT world. You wouldn't see that many years ago. And so I'm really hopeful that it can continue.
I'm so glad that you said normalize not knowing because 5 years
Exactly.
ago, it did not exist.
Yeah.
And the advancements just by months is exponential. So it's like we shouldn't know everything because there's no way to know.
Sheena, by days now. I mean, I wake up and what I learned last night is irrelevant.
Right.
I have to learn it all over again. Now the whole thing changed. And that's okay. I think one of the biggest and most important skills, and I know I wrote about this maybe a few months ago, is learning how to learn. You just have to learn how to learn. And that's what's going to set you apart from everyone else, because things are changing so fast. And I don't mean like to be overwhelmed by all of this, but to know that, oh, there's this new thing. Okay, let me watch a video. Okay, let me play with it. Let's see what happens. Be open to not knowing and be open to learning about everything that's happening.
Absolutely. And speaking of learning and creating spaces, I know that through 5X Minority, you've created this platform that's centered on mentorship, inclusive leadership, and psychological safety. How have you been leveraging digital tools and networks to uplift others as you rise?
Mm. Well, I can tell you AI has helped a lot. It's amazing. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed because there's so much that I could do. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't have the time right now, but I know that these are the things I want to do. I've been able to create a lot of free guides now that I share. And I created a newsletter that I started weekly, and then I realized that was too much. So I had to switch to monthly because I need to love myself also in this at the same time. I work a lot with other brands so that we can share knowledge that is common to the two of us, just like I'm sitting here with you today, because the work that we do is similar. I love having a lot of, public conversations about bias and pay transparency and understanding what's happening around us. Um, I think that we have to share the knowledge that we have, especially as women. I think sometimes we've been told that there is only room for one of us at the top. And so if you see a lot of the content that I share on social media and LinkedIn and Instagram, I'm trying to share how that is all a lie. And Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. We know better now. It's not true. We can help each other. And there's a lot of room for more than one at the top. And so I'm focusing on using my voice.
How do we subscribe to this monthly newsletter?
Oh, yes. So if you go to 5X Minority on LinkedIn, the newsletter is coming out every month now. I share a lot of data. It's data heavy, especially now with AI. And I also have a freebie. I love creating magazines or books or ebooks that I can share with my community.
And looking at the, larger landscape today, what are some of the signals of a strong, inclusive culture within an organization?
Mm, yes, this is really good. And I've seen this a few times already because I look for that whenever I start in a new environment. The first thing that I would say is that you notice that people feel safe to speak up. You know, people feel safe to disagree with leadership, which I tell my team all the time. If you disagree with me, tell me. I have always something to learn. I'm here to learn from you. And not only disagree, but there is a space for them to do that, and their voices are heard, and people follow up after that. Um, you would see a space where meetings are not dominated by the same voice or the loudest voice. And so having an inclusive culture is very important. The other thing you would see is that equity shows up in career development. You find stretch assignments and you see different people. One of the things I used to do when a manager would start a project is I would look at the team and say, why isn't Maria part of this project team? I see the same people assigned to the same teams. What's happening here? Where are we missing? Why are we selecting the same people? And so being intentional about including everyone and understanding what do people want at the end of the day. One of the things that I share with my team is that, they don't work for me. I work for them. I'm there to remove every obstacle they have, to help them in their career, because it's not about me anymore. I've done it already. I've done it all. There is nothing else for me. I'm here to support them. And so understanding that, and also knowing that there is a place where accountability exists, and people are allowed to make mistakes, and people would say that they're wrong when they are wrong. I think all of that is an environment that is just gold for anyone who wants to feel calm at the end of the day when they go home.
And for the women, particularly those from underrepresented communities who, aspire to make an impact in tech and leadership, just like you have, what advice would you give them about rising with purpose and about lifting other women as they ascend, just like you have?
Yeah, that's very good. Let me think about that. I think we started the conversation talking about power. And the one thing that I would say is don't confuse proximity to power with impact, because it's not always there. The first thing that I would say is build your expertise. I started working as a help desk technician, and every year I had a goal. I knew, okay, I'm going to learn web design. Okay, now, public speaking. Let me learn that. Oh, project management. I'm going to be PMP certified. And so always know, like, what's the next thing? Where are you going? What's the direction? Because if not, then people will pull you into 20 different directions, and in the end, you're not going anywhere. So know where you're going, and then create a list. What are the things I'm going to learn so that I can get there? I remember looking at people who had the next title that I wanted, and I would go on LinkedIn to see what their profile looked like. What did they have that I don't have yet? And then let me learn that. The second one would be build networks. That is more important than people realize nowadays. Having a network of people that you can rely on, that you can call upon when you need it, who can help you when you need help, who can share information that you want to share and you want to make sure that it can reach a bigger audience. That's really important. Personal brand, I'll mention quickly because people will never know how amazing you are unless you tell them. Stop waiting for other people to tell them. They won't. You need to tell them. And it's very difficult for Latinas because we are raised to be very quiet and to never show off. And so it feels very uncomfortable when you speak about yourself. And then the last thing, build a financial literacy. None of these other things matter if you don't understand how to invest your money and how to set yourself for success in the future when you're ready to retire. And so all of that combined, I think is really going to help you. And then lift others. Once you make it and you're there, look back and reach a hand and help somebody else do the same thing that maybe someone else did for you before. Because I had amazing mentors who did that for me early on in my career.
Well, Elaine, thank you so much for this conversation. I think what I really appreciate about this is that it's a great reminder that innovation without inclusion isn't progress, and that leadership today requires both courage and compassion. And I'm so glad that you modeled that for us, especially having had your journey. It's so important to remember that the human-centeredness of things is just key.
Yes. And the future needs our voices in it. So use it. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And to our listeners, if something in today's conversation resonated, we invite you to take the next step. World Pulse exists to be a digital bridge, connecting women across the world so that no one has to lead, learn, or build change alone. To learn more or to get involved, visit impact.worldpulse.org or simply click on the link in the show notes for this episode. Because whether you're here to listen, to contribute, or to simply belong, there's a place for you on this bridge. Thank you for joining us in the World Pulse podcast today. This conversation does not end here. It continues through connection. We'll see you next time.